Welcome to Take Command, a Dale Carnegie podcast, the show where we seek to uncover what leadership means in today's world. I'm Joe Hart, CEO of Dale Carnegie, and we will be talking to diverse leaders with stories to tell across various industries to help unlock your potential for success. We will be sharing real-life insights into leadership, which in turn can help spark the next level of your growth as a leader. Today's guest is a lifelong learner dedicated to serving others and shaping future leaders. He was the CEO of one of the world's largest fast casual restaurant companies, overseeing nearly 4,000 locations across 10 countries. With prior roles as Krispy Kreme's president and 23 years at Yum! Brands, including Global President of KFC, his leadership is unparalleled. Please welcome the chairman of the board of Panera Brands, Niren Chaudhary. Niren, welcome to the Dale Carnegie Take Command podcast.
Hey, Joe. Great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you. And I've been looking forward to this interview for some time. We met back in June at Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches Conference in Nashville. We really connected immediately at that time. And since that time, I've had a chance really to meet you and get to know you and learn about your leadership. And truly, you are a person who puts people first, an inspiring, high-integrity leader. And I know we're going to have a great conversation. You know, Niren, when I asked you to be on this podcast, it was for a number of reasons. I mean, certainly what you've done at Panera and what you've done in your career and your mindset. Again, people can be, financially successful in a business and maybe not necessarily be great leaders, at least not by the definition that we would say for Dale Carnegie in terms of just, focusing on people and bringing out the best in others. Since that time, I learned a lot more about you personally. There are two movies about you that people may or may not be familiar with. One is The Sky is Pink. Another is Black Sunshine Baby. These are absolutely incredible movies that I would encourage everyone who's listening to watch. Inspiring, moving, but they really focus on, I think, even you and your family, just the deeply human side of who you are and the experiences that you've had. Share a little bit about those movies and your experiences with your daughter, Tanya, with your wife, with Aisha, if you would, please.
Thanks, Joe. So, I've had my share of challenges, as we all do, in my personal life. I've lost two daughters, Tanya, who passed away when she was 8, and then Aisha more recently when she was 18 years old. She passed away in 2015. And then I have a son, an absolutely incredible son. His name is Ashan. He's a full-time musician. I'm very grateful for him. But I think the loss of my daughters, obviously, it's been the hardest thing I've had to deal with as a parent. I think it's a parent's worst nightmare is to outlive their children or to lose them in the way in which we did, which was both the terminal illnesses. And I have to say that the loss of my children has shaped who I am, has deepened the compassion in my heart, my sense of empathy, and my desire to live life in a more holistic sense. And perhaps the way in which I show up as a leader, is deeply influenced by my own personal experiences, as is so often the case. My daughter, Tanya, of course, passed away very early. The common thing that I learned, my loss of my two daughters, Tanya and Aisha, was the importance of being financially independent to be able to look after your family. I was in a situation where I didn't have the means to look after them, and it is the most desperate feeling a father can ever have, is to feel that you're inadequate to look after your own. And that in some ways, has fueled me to keep going and keep trying to learn and have an impact and grow myself so that I'm never ever in a position where I can't look after, my own. But then Tanya passed away very quickly, but Aisha, who was with us for 18 years, continues to inspire me. It's probably my biggest inspiration because that child was just extraordinary. She was 13 when she was told she has 5 years to live. But what was remarkable was that rather than focusing on the fact that she didn't have long to live, she focused on the fact, oh, I have 5 years to live. That's fantastic. And the way in which she embraced her reality and lived her life with such incredible zeal and intensity that she's ended up inspiring millions. As you mentioned, she's an inspirational speaker with TED. There are TED Talks on YouTube. She's written a best-selling book called My Little Epiphanies on Amazon. And the two movies you talked about, Sky is Pink and Black Sunshine Baby, all inspired by the remarkable life of a child who ended up achieving more in her short life than many of us do in our lifetime. And her story and the way she inspires me is her story of courage, her story of gratitude, the importance of gratitude, and the importance of giving. And those three, interestingly, have become my own core values as I show up. So courage to me is, focusing on what you can do and what you have control over, and not over what you don't or what is happening to you. So that's a very important value for me. Gratitude is waking up every day with a sense of gratefulness and focus on what you have rather than despairing about what you have lost. And then giving is about living with a life with a generous heart, of looking for opportunities of converting your personal pain into purpose and by serving others. And I have found that, a combination of these three, of courage and gratitude and a sense of generosity, has been very healing for me as I move forward. That's what has inspired me, shapes me. Finally, my fourth value, which defines who I am, is a combination of all of this, is to be congruent, which is what I think, feel, say, and do should always be aligned. So there is just one version of me that shows up in front of people and behind their backs. And I think, these four values are essentially what I hold myself accountable to. And they have been shaped by my life experiences. I really believe that everything changes in life. That's true for everyone who's listening to us. But then we are shaped not by what happens to us, but how we choose to respond to what happens to us. And in that choice lies opportunity. That's what I've learned from the loss of my daughters, and that's how I try to live my life as I go forward.
Thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine how painful that experience was. The fact that you have really developed greater courage and gratitude, and this focus on living in this congruence has clearly shaped who you are and how you lead and all the people that you impact. If there's maybe one thing that people take away from this podcast, it seems to me that is it. You talked about choice, taking command of our thoughts and our emotions. This is something we teach in the Dale Carnegie course, but we have choice. Even in the midst of the worst situations, how are we going to respond to the things that are happening? It'd be easy to have a victim mindset. It'd be easy to say, woe is me. And I know Aisha didn't do that. She was prolific as a writer. She wrote as an artist. She spoke. I mean, she really shared who she was with the world and inspired countless people, and clearly inspired you in your leadership.
Yeah. Absolutely, without doubt. There's nobody in this world who's not dealing with some difficulty or the other. But I think just sort of accepting what is happening and then quickly pivoting to what can I do about what is happening, I think can unlock a lot of hope. And I think as human beings, I think we all get inspired by hope. And we keep moving forward and have the strength to get up and be resilient with hope. I think sometimes we forget that we have that choice, like you said, that in that moment of despair, when nothing seems to be working and everything seems to be happening to us, we still have the opportunity to choose how to respond to what's happening to us.
We do, and we also are far more capable often than we think. There's a great quote that we have more competence than we often have confidence. So sometimes starting with hope and looking backwards at all the reasons why we should be confident can empower us to make the right choices when we face those very, very difficult situations. You are the chairman of Panera Brands, or the CEO there. You've spent many years. You were the president of Krispy Kreme, over 22 years at Yum Brands. Truly an impressive career trajectory in terms of all you've done. Share a little bit about your path, your journey that took you from where you were really when you started graduating college in India to the highest levels of leadership in the corporate world.
Well, it's been an absolutely incredible ride. As you know, I was born in India, went to school there and college and did my MBA, after which I joined the House of Tatas, which is a premier industrial house. And interestingly, through them, I started my career with Intercontinental Hotels. And I think it was at that hotel early in my 20s, I just fell in love with hospitality. And it was primarily because, it had everything to do with people. As employees, as customers, and I was just very drawn to it. Felt very inspired by being in that kind of an industry. And then after a few years of that, I joined Yum Brands and spent more than 20 years with them. And I had the privilege of getting lots of different types of opportunities, living in different cultures, different countries. Netherlands, speak a bit of Dutch, Germany, then the UK, came back to India, started all three brands here, and then became the Global President for KFC, looking after a portfolio of countries. And I would say across my experience with Yum Brands, it was just fantastic to steward the brand for growth across different geographies, which are different stages of evolution. The brand is in different stages of maturity. The cultures are different, and yet the brand is the same. Same but different. And learning how to scale a global brand in a way that it resonates with local consumers was a fascinating opportunity for me. I can easily say that Yum really shaped who I am as a leader, and my people first philosophy and the importance of culture really came home to me there.
And how did that happen? What did you learn from that experience that shaped you?
Well, we had this extraordinary founding chairman and CEO, David Novak. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was
Yes.
an absolutely incredible leader, people focused, and he always talked about, he believed that the job of a great leader is to build a culture which would in turn enable trust and help people to unlock their best potential. And culture is, essentially about defining what are similar behaviors and values that everybody needs to believe in. And he led it by example. He institutionalized the culture. He had rituals around the culture. And he was such a strong proponent of this people first culture that it spread across the world. And I think that I saw firsthand the power of what that can do to build successful businesses all over the world. In particular, David used to always talk about the most important leader in a food retail company is the general manager in a cafe. It's not the CEO, it's not the executive team, and we all exist to serve them. So many values like that have, shaped me as I've built my career. And then recently I joined JAB and through them worked at Krispy Kreme, incredible company, the best donuts in the world, grew that business internationally, was living in London. And then I think the last 4.5 odd years probably been the best phase of my working career, leading brands such as Panera Bread, Caribou Coffee, Einstein Bagels, phenomenal brands. And it has been such an honor to have worked alongside the team there to transform the company and business through unprecedented external shocks. In a funny way, it's really sort of inspired us to be resilient, to be inventive, and keep getting better. It's been absolutely incredible, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had, the mentors that I've met along the way, and the incredible brands that I've worked for.
You've led incredible brands. You've led tens of thousands of people, thousands of stores. You mentioned the kind of unprecedented shock, and certainly it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about how you led through COVID. What did you learn and how did you handle that? What was your approach toward that, even just within your own mindset?
It was pretty sort of daunting at first because we didn't know what we were dealing with. I had just come into the company in 2019. I was just about getting my feet under the table, so to speak, just getting to know everybody, the teams. And before we knew it, we were all sitting remotely and trying to manage a business that was declining rather rapidly. It's pretty sort of unnerving. And then maybe it's, because of the challenges that I've had to deal with at a personal level. And somehow I just get inspired when things are really tough. And I just feel that, I'm the leader, I have to lead, everybody is looking to me, and I have to provide the stewardship at this point and provide the direction and the sense of calm in terms of how we can proceed. And what I learned was that, think about it, you're all decentralized. You're not in a singular room. You can't bring everybody together and speak to them. So you have to really simplify the message and create a framework through which the leaders can start making micro decisions that all add up towards the right eventual goal. So let me explain what I mean. So the first thing that we did was to really clarify what is the mindset that we wish to embrace as a company, as leaders, as individuals. And we declared upfront that, we're going to look upon this as an unprecedented opportunity to get stronger and to get better. We talked about the mindset of being a windmill, meaning that we will stand tall and harness the fury of these changes and convert that into something good. And we're not going to jump around into a bunker and be defensive. We're going to stand tall and we're going to actually leverage this to become better. So that was the mindset that we talked about to all the stakeholders. And then importantly, we also said, what's truly important? Define what's truly important. And we said that there are only two things that are important. One is to protect the lives of our customers and our employees. And the second is to protect the brand and the business. So we clarified the mindset, we clarified the goals, and then we also articulated what are the values through which we will make our decisions and use those as guiding posts, as filters to decide. And there we said that we will not hesitate to take tough actions to protect the lives of employees and our customers and the brand and business. However, whatever we do, we will do it with compassion and with the utmost respect and complete candor and complete transparency. So, simplifying this overarching message of mindset, what's truly important, how we will make decisions, enabled this almost decentralized organization sitting around these computer screens to have a common language to start converging and using as a guiding post for their micro decisions that would then come together and make the organization remarkably resilient, also inspired, and therefore quite inventive in this tough environment to keep strengthening the brand, the business, and the team.
Truly an HBR case study in terms of how you reacted in that moment. You talked about mindset, and I'm curious because, it's one thing to have the mindset of the leader, yet we need to impart that mindset on other people. You're dealing with people who were afraid. You were dealing with people who had personal situations. I mean, we were all going through this together. How do you inspire someone in your experience who might be resistant to that mindset, who might be facing fear or not really know how to move forward?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think the only way a leader can inspire is through his or her actions. I mean, whatever the leader does, the leader has to demonstrate what they're talking about with a sense of empathy, compassion, respect in this case, and looking upon this with a sense of enthusiasm. So I'll share some examples. And before I do that, one other thing that we did share with the enterprise was that at such moments in time, companies and leaders have to step up and do the right thing and build trust with our stakeholders. It's not only about survival, it's about laying the stones and the foundation for the future. And the only way you can do that is that when times are tough, that you actually think of your other stakeholders, such as your customers. How can you be of service to them, such as your employees? How can you be of service to them, such as your community? How can you be of service to the community? And build trust. So use the mindset, it's not only survival, it's building trust for the future. So that was sort of the mindset, and we'll talk about that repeatedly. But then, more importantly than all the words is how you show up and how do you actually respond to what's happening around you. And I have to say that Panera all along had an intrinsic spirit of being very resilient and inventive for the last so many years. And we just had to tap back into it and remind, the teams as to what we stand for and what makes us so unique. And we did that with some examples of in the way in which we were responding to the challenges of the time. So if it was for guests, we said, how can we serve them? How can we actually have wins for the shareholder, for the employee, and for the customer in everything that we do? And so not just play defensive, but actually use this as an opportunity. We noticed that customers were struggling, and you may remember at that time, to order our grocery from supermarkets. I remember sitting down with my wife, and they said the delivery time would be 3 weeks from the day that we ordered. And it was just, basic grocery delivery order. And we realized, our business is down. We have potential write-off on our ingredients. And why not just start a Panera grocery business? And we started that in 2 weeks flat. New line of business to really start selling grocery items from our stores. Now, it worked for a while. It did not work forever. And therefore, of course, we backed off from it. But I think the more important thing is the spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit, and the desire to serve and the desire to sort of move quickly. Another example is, we didn't have drive-thrus. So we opened up curbside pickup in about, 1,000 stores in about a week. Again, shows the urgency with which this company is moving in a desire to serve our guests. Similarly, when we had to furlough our associates, we said, yes, that's a very tough thing to do, but we have to do it. But can we do it with compassion and with respect? And therefore, we found alternate employment for our furloughed employees, talking to other companies. We also invited the families of our furloughed employees to come and have a meal at any Panera once a week, so that the furloughed employees would not feel that they're forgotten, And on the community side as well, we were looking for opportunities on how we can serve. I don't know if you recall, but food banks were running out of food at that time. And therefore, we pledged to feed at least 1 million American families. Being a restaurant company, it just felt the right thing to do. So those are examples of when the leader is sort of encouraging these types of ideas and encouraging and really, going after them, it kind of signals to the company that, this is not just talk. The intention is real, and we are going to recover by doing the right big things for our stakeholders and build trust. And when we do build trust, we will create a better future and tomorrow collectively for the enterprise. So those were some ways in which we essentially encouraged disruptive thinking. We supported disruptive thinking because honestly, we had nothing to lose. The company then starts redefining success. So the success becomes redefined by how fast we can move with solutions and how well do we execute solutions by focusing on what we have control over.
It's interesting because you look at what you did and, you talk about words like service and love and compassion and respect. There are different schools of thought relative to leadership. Certainly the things that you talk about, people first, these are Dale Carnegie ideas that certainly we promote, the idea that we want to bring out the best in people and so forth. And yet, one of the things I hear from a lot of people, and Niren, we think about even younger leaders, people are trying to find their own leadership. They look at other people. There are examples of a different kind of leadership, a leadership which is more hard-nosed. You say, we got to get results, and it's, you do this. It's a lot less compassionate. It's a lot less about service. I recently was in India. I know where you're from, and I gave a talk, and people had said, hey, why do people first, and why have this kind of an approach when you've got very successful people? Steve Jobs is an example of someone who's been known to be a very hard-edged kind of person. What do you tell leaders or people when they say, why should I adopt an approach that is people first versus one that might be more command and control when you've got examples of others who've created great businesses as well?
No, absolutely. I think that's such an important question. There is no singular way towards, creating enterprise value. You're right. I think you could have a hard-edged leadership style, and then you could have a more inclusive, people-first style, or you could have a combination of the two. I think it depends at the end of the day in terms of what you define success to be. My deep conviction is that leadership is a privilege, and leaders ought to be force multipliers for good in a broader sense of the term, meaning that leaders ought to be working towards inclusive enterprise success. Some people call it conscious capitalism, etc. But it is my belief that enterprise value will be sustainable only if we respect all the stakeholders, which is, as we become successful, help unlock the dreams of people who work with us, create better futures. As we become successful, that we find ways to serve our community. And as we become more successful, we find ways to protect the planet. I feel that if we do that, which is people, community, planet, that becomes a virtuous cycle with profit. And here's how I see it. I think profit is very important. If you don't have profit, you cannot drive purpose. So I think profit fuels purpose. profit is the oxygen and the energy for purpose. And then I think purpose, we as leaders have the responsibility to discover new business models that can propel purpose back into more profit. And I do think that it is possible. And there are examples of that where it's not easily possible, but it is possible. And if enterprises are able to unlock this virtuous cycle of profit to purpose and purpose back into profit, that can become essentially a virtuous cycle that continues to expand and grow in a way that is sustainable because you're taking everybody along. So let me give you some examples. So the primary responsibility of an enterprise leader is to make sure that the enterprise is profitable and is growing profits year on year. You owe that to the shareholders. Absolutely no question about that. Once you do that, if you're able to tap into business accretive ways of delivering purpose, then that becomes a virtuous loop back. So for example, at Panera, we care very deeply about our ingredients. You may be aware, but our ingredients are the highest quality. There's nothing artificial. Everything is responsibly raised, etc. Now, we're also very conscious about carbon footprint and impact on planet. 10 years ago, Panera was the first brand to make transparent the calorific value of our food, and then that became an industry standard. And now recently, the company has actually made transparent the carbon footprint of the food that we serve. And to realize that almost half of the food that we serve is actually climate positive. And therefore, we are giving the customers an opportunity to choose in a very responsible way towards products that are climate accretive. And it's a win in that way for the brand, for the customers, for the employees, and for the shareholder. It gives the brand a unique, distinctive proposition. And it is generally good. It's good for planet, it's good for the shareholders, it's good for the customers. So I think the challenge is not whether a people-first inclusive business model is superior or inferior. As far as we know right now, I think the case for purpose-driven activities being profit accretive is still to be made. It's harder, but I do passionately believe that it can be done.
Well, I mean, you're an example of that. What we are trying to do on this show, the Take Man podcast, is really to highlight people who are high integrity, inspiring leaders who are leading with the kind of Dale Carnegie mindset that we see so many leaders around the world. You and I both have a friend, Alan Mullally, who's the perfect example of humility, love, and service at Ford Motor Company when he was leading that, and Boeing. That's the approach that I try to take, and we try to take at Dale Carnegie throughout the world. My sense is that we have this one life, and if we can bring the best out in other people and have a purpose orientation and be profitable and successful, why wouldn't we do that when the alternative is often people who are, maybe exclusively hard driving, they really don't care about their people, they may get the results, but I think about the impact that they have on the organizational culture, what people are going home with. Using Alan as an example, I think about all the people at Ford who might have left and gone home. Their days are different. Their family life is different. The communities are different because you've got someone who's really working on transparency and trust and bringing out the best in other people and working together, versus someone who goes home and says, gosh, I hate my job, or I had a horrible day today or whatnot. And you're the proof positive of this as well.
I really believe that at the end of the day, when I reflect back on my career, my most fulfilling moments are those when I see the people that I have worked with who have become incredibly successful. And I have had a role to play in them believing more in themselves and unlocking their own potential and living better lives and better opportunity for their kids and their family. For me, that is priceless. And I think that probably gives me more joy than anything else. And I do believe that businesses are, at the heart of it, a human experience that we're doing collectively and moving forward to achieve some great success in a more holistic way, as we were speaking. And if one can enrich the human experience by just helping expand the opportunities for people to uncover their true potential, then that's very valuable. And certainly for me as a leader, deeply fulfilling.
So what is your advice to people who might agree with you? I think about people who might be in middle management or working up the career path, and they believe philosophically in what you and I are saying. they look around the organization and not everyone else does. In fact, maybe their boss has a different philosophy. Maybe the CEO has a different philosophy, and it's a really difficult environment. How do you encourage people to live in a way that's consistent with this kind of people first mindset when the larger environment may not necessarily support that?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's obviously easier, if you're a CEO and you believe in this and then you essentially create that culture and bring that to life, much, much easier. So I would say two things. One, try and find an organization that mirrors the values that you believe in. If you find a company that intrinsically believes in what you believe in, and if what you believe in is people first and a compassionate, humanistic culture, then you can just join that company, be yourself, and have an absolutely fantastic time and a very fulfilling career. But if that is not the case, and you are at middle-level management, and you're in a company which, has perhaps a different culture, a hybrid culture, and has pockets of compassion and high performance, and nothing wrong with that, then I always believe that, when I've been in a similar situation, that I try and focus on what I have control over, which is my team, and I try and lead them in a way that I think really resonates with who I am as a leader. So in my own world and my piece of the organization, I really role model the kind of leader I would love to work for. And I think it's a low risk experiment. You will learn a lot. You'll be true to yourself. You'll be encouraged. You'll tweak it. Some things will work. Some things may not work as you find the right balance between performance and purpose, etc. That's what I would encourage you to do, because we always have control over what we steward, and we can be the kind of leaders that we wish to work for and give that gift to the people who are working for us.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, we are the leaders of our own lives, right? We talk about taking command. And in any environment in which we live, we need to be true to ourselves. You talked about being true to values, even for people to take time to think about, what are my values? How do I want to be known? What do I want my reputation to be? What kind of leader? I mean, I've seen examples, I know you have too, of individuals who in an organization could be a catalyst or a spark. People see the way that they're behaving. It's like, oh, wow, the results you're getting are great. So certainly we could be an example. Niren, you've learned so much over your life and your career, your experiences, the professional ones, the personal ones. If you were to go back and have a conversation with a younger Niren, the 23-year-old Niren, what advice might you give yourself?
First, I would remark to the younger me that I still look very young.
That's right. That's the good news, right? Hey, good news. You look great as you get older.
On a serious note, I often think that the one piece of advice I wish I knew way back then was to be aware of my strengths, not so much my weakness. I think whatever makes us strong can potentially take us out if it is overplayed. And let me just expand. I really believe that when we are thinking about developing and growing ourselves, we are often told, watch out for your weaknesses and work on them and grow your strengths. I really think that your strengths should be towering strengths, and you should always develop those. But I think instead of working on your weaknesses, be aware of the shadow side of an overplayed strength. So like, for example, I believe that one of my strengths, as we just discussed, is I love people. I believe in people. I trust people. I believe in the inherent goodness of people. And you can imagine, if that is my mindset, if that is overplayed, then the dark side of that strength is that I can be misled. I can trust too easily. I may not know what's happening. I might be blindsided. I might take too long to make the hard calls on people because I fall in love with people, So I think that's the shadow side. So it's great, that's who I am and that's what defines me, but then there is a cost that one has to pay for being that. And therefore the question is, so do you stop being people focused? I think the answer is no. You make that a towering strength. You double down on that even more because that is so uniquely you, but you create an intervention by acknowledging the dark side of your strength when it's overplayed. So for example, in this case, I would like to frequently cultivate truth tellers in my life. So personal truth tellers, my wife. She doesn't hesitate to hit me between my eyes periodically. My son, some of my close friends, and then at work, as I move around and I go to cafes or I meet people across the organization, when I meet a fearless leader who has the courage to speak their mind without any fear, I will actually enlist them and say, will you be my truth teller? Will you periodically, when we speak, just tell me and give me the unvarnished truth so that I'm not blindsided and I can actually connect the dots better and I want to listen better. Similarly, I have another strength, which is I love to learn. I'm deeply curious. I'm at my best when I'm inspired and I'm learning and I'm getting new ideas, right? Now look at the flip side of that. If it's overplayed, there's a dark side, which is if I'm learning and I'm prematurely releasing those ideas in the organization, there's chaos. People are saying, okay, what's important to this guy, And can we just prioritize and focus and just choose a few streams of work and just hunker down and execute and not keep jumping around? So then once I recognize that, the intervention that I might create is to surround myself with a very strong CFO or a chief people officer and ask them to help me stay focused. Share with them and say, hey, listen, I sometimes just ideate openly. Doesn't mean that I want you to go and do this, but just keep me honest, because I do realize that I have to be focused and it has to be, very targeted. And I will, of course, raise my own awareness and resist the temptation to prematurely share many ideas, but hold me accountable. So that's what I mean. I think I would tell the younger me that, of course, build on your strengths, but beware of your strengths, and then create appropriate interventions along the way by enlisting the support of people both in your personal and professional life who can keep you honest and keep the dark side of your overplayed strength in check as you move forward.
Well, even to have that approach would strike me that one needs to be deeply introspective, right? I mean, because a lot of times we can focus on our strengths. And someone asked me the other day, do you focus on strengths or the weaknesses? And I'd say we all have certain things that are superpowers for us. I mean, certain things that really are unique to us. And if we align our careers, our lives around those things, we can do just amazing work and have great relationships and so forth. As a younger person, I used to focus a lot on my weaknesses. And I used to think, if I could just root this out, I'll get to this level of perfection. There's no level of perfection. I'm always going to be a flawed person, so to speak. But I'm curious, when you get to that level of saying, hey, I've got to be wary of the shadow side of the strength, you have to be very introspective. Do you create time for yourself to think about these things, or is this just something that's happened over experience?
I think one of the things that I take very seriously is when I have my one-on-one conversations at work, or also deep conversations with people in my personal life, my friends or my family, etc. I always like to seek out feedback. Feedback is not just, something that I do once a year. It's like in every conversation, multiple times a day, with people that I trust, who I know will give me the unvarnished truth and have the courage to tell me exactly the way it is. And once you have positional power, it depends on how you ask people. If you ask them, do you have any feedback for me? Invariably, you are told how great you are. So if you tell them, hey, I want 2 things from you on how I can be more effective, it's very difficult to wriggle out of that. So it's a way in which you ask the question, you display a serious intent to really listen, and then you actually act upon it, and then you kind of feed it. And then I think you get a lot more feedback more quickly. And then I think you develop those relationships with people who are unafraid to tell you, who are committed to you and your growth, and you have mentors. I think surrounding yourself with people who are going to tell you exactly the way you are being seen. Because, I have learned that the challenge of a leader is to converge your intent and the impact that you're having. Your intent could be one thing, but your impact through your behaviors, through the words, how you show up could be very different. And I think the more one is able to converge that through feedback, that what my intent is, how I want to show up, and I'm measuring the impact that I'm having, and they're convergent, the more successful you can be, because, then you're being really congruent and you can actually, inspire trust. So this intent and impact thing, I think, is quite critical.
That's very important. And I guess how we receive feedback too, in that moment that we ask for feedback. I, in my past, have been defensive, and that's a way to shut down feedback, but we have to say thank you. And just take that feedback. We can learn from it or listen or not, but certainly we want to give that person the respect and the gratitude because it's gold often. I've always said that your friends are people who will tell you have spinach in your teeth. Your friends will tell you, hey, by the way.
It is absolutely true. And it's hard, it's very hard, especially, like when my wife gives me feedback, it hurts. I just take the dogs out for a walk and cool down and come back and kind of agree with it. But deep inside you, you know that you need that. And I think the more it actually hurts, the more valuable it is. So I think really being open to feedback is invaluable on one's journey.
It's a path to growth for sure if we embrace it and are circumspect about it. One thing I've been doing in this podcast is going to ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT, I'll explain the podcast and that I'm interviewing Niren Chaudhary. And, what are some questions you'd ask? And I get some questions. And I said, what is one question? If there's only one question you could ask Niren Chaudhary, what would you ask? I'm going to read you the one question that ChatGPT has for you. We've touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to let you answer it just as the question is written. What single piece of advice or insight from your career journey do you believe has had the most profound impact on your success and can inspire our audience to find their inner strength and live a fulfilling life?
So, well, as you're asking me that question, I'm also typing ChatGPT to see what a good answer is. No.
Well, there may be a day where neither one of us are here. It will still be our ChatGPT images will be having a conversation with each other. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a great question, actually. There may be two things that have deeply impacted me. The single biggest attribute for any leader is to be a lifelong learner and to have the humility to know that we don't know anything. And that walking into any situation with that mindset of, I don't really know, or what I know may be wrong, is an infinitely better way to be than the other way around, to have the arrogance of knowledge. I often sort of remind myself of that. It's very easy to forget, especially as you have positional power. But, just to sort of step back and say, I may be wrong, and let me just listen truly to understand as opposed to just wait for them to hear what I have to say. So that's one, a lifelong learner. The second one, I think, is that leadership is about inspiring trust. You can inspire trust in leadership by having two things: character and competence. You mentioned, competence earlier. I think we all get that. I think we don't perhaps quite understand the importance of character. And I think, ironically, beyond a certain level of intelligence and beyond a certain level of competence, the differentiating, distinguishing aspect or attribute of leadership that is correlated with success, I believe, is character, which is being congruent, being consistent, because you have clarity of who you are and what you stand for. This is the best piece of advice, because I think I was told that don't spend your time only developing your competence, but spend time in deepening your character by having a firm commitment to the clarity of your values and who you are and what you stand for. And by the way, your values can change. The hierarchy of your values can change depending on the stage of life you're in and what your purpose is. And that's fine. But I think periodically looking at that and working on it. And, as we all know, our values are then shaped by our life experiences, by our mentors, by what we read, our spiritual practice, the things that we do, all of that shapes us. And therefore, seeking out experiences and mentors and books that can help enrich our values so that we end up embracing values that are most important, that are, I would say, consistent with the future that we wish to create, is a way to really strengthen character. So I would say those two things: to be a lifelong learner and to really focus on not just developing competence, but also strengthening one's character.
Well, tremendous advice, Niren. I thank you so much. We talk about being intentional, and that's really so much of what you've just said is we need to be intentional about our learning, about our character, about our virtue, and how we're connecting with other people. So fabulous having you with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. Been a real pleasure.
Join us and order a copy of Take Command in hardcover, ebook, or audiobook format at your favorite bookseller or at takecommandbook.com. Also, you can visit takecommand.com for more information about the book and additional resources. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Take Command, a Dale Carnegie podcast. Check out our resources page at www.dalecarnegie.com for more research, insight, and tools that will support your success in taking command of your leadership potential. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating it and subscribing to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us for the next episode of Take Command, a Dale Carnegie podcast.